Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves Caitlin Clark.
The deeper the season progressed for Indiana Fever, the more the situation surrounding Caitlin Clark began to feel less like ordinary rookie adversity and more like a franchise being crushed under the weight of impossible expectations, nonstop controversy, and internal instability. What was originally supposed to be the beginning of a historic new era for the WNBA quickly transformed into a pressure cooker unlike anything women's professional basketball had ever experienced. Every game became a national event. Every hard foul turned into a social media firestorm. Every coaching decision from Christie's sides was dissected by millions of viewers who expected instant success from a team that had been rebuilding for years before Clark ever arrived. The emotional intensity surrounding the Fever reached a point where even major sports personalities like Stephen A. Smith openly questioned whether the league and the organization were doing enough to protect their biggest star. His criticism carried enormous influence because it framed the issue as something much larger than basketball strategy or rookie struggles. According to this growing narrative, Clark was not simply facing tough competition. She was becoming the center of a league-wide cultural battle involving resentment, old guard resistance, media pressure, and institutional failure. The argument gaining traction among many fans was that the WNBA benefited enormously from Clark's popularity while simultaneously failing to shield her from the intense physicality, scrutiny, and hostility that came with it. Viral incidents involving players such as Chindi Carter fueled the perception that Clark was being deliberately targeted in ways that went beyond normal professional basketball competition. Every aggressive play against her became symbolic of something bigger, feeding the belief that some veteran players resented the unprecedented fame, sold-out arenas, endorsement deals, and nonstop national attention surrounding one rookie. That tension only intensified after Clark was left off the United States women's national basketball team Olympic roster, a decision that many fans interpreted not simply as a basketball choice, but as another sign that parts of the basketball establishment were unwilling to fully embrace the new face of the sport. For Clark supporters, the omission reinforced a growing narrative that no matter how much she elevated ratings, merchandise sales, and public attention for the league, powerful figures within the sport still viewed her as an outsider disrupting an existing hierarchy. Inside the Fever organization itself, the atmosphere appeared increasingly strained. Christie's sides faced relentless criticism over offensive schemes, player rotations, defensive breakdowns, and what many fans viewed as a failure to publicly defend Clark with enough passion after controversial fouls or rough treatment on the court. Whether fair or not, sides became trapped in a no-win position where every loss magnified questions about her leadership and every public comment was analyzed for signs of weakness or disconnect. At the same time, fans closely scrutinized Clark's chemistry with teammates like Aaliyah Boston and others, interpreting body language, reactions during games, and emotional moments on the bench as evidence of deeper locker room tension. Much of that speculation likely exceeded reality, but it reflected the extraordinary pressure surrounding the franchise. The Fever were no longer simply trying to develop a young roster. They had become the center of the biggest story in modern women's basketball, carrying the hopes of league expansion, media growth, television ratings, and financial transformation all at once. That burden created an environment where every setback felt catastrophic and every rumor spiraled into national controversy within hours. The fear now echoing through sports media is not necessarily that Caitlin Clark is literally preparing to leave Indiana tomorrow, but that the constant combination of physical punishment, overwhelming expectations, media obsession, and organizational instability could eventually wear down even a generational talent emotionally and mentally. The conversation has shifted from whether Clark can succeed to whether the league and franchise around her are stable enough to support the phenomenon they helped create. What makes the situation so dramatic is that the WNBA has never experienced anything quite like this before. Clark is simultaneously the league's greatest opportunity and its most explosive source of tension. The Fever are trying to balance rebuilding a basketball team while operating at the center of a nonstop national media storm, and every mistake now carries massive symbolic weight far beyond a single game or season. Whether the organization can stabilize itself, improve chemistry, quiet the outside noise, and build a healthier environment around Clark may ultimately determine not just the future of the franchise, but the direction and public perception of the WNBA during the most important growth period in its history as the pressure surrounding Caitlin Clark continues to intensify. The most troubling part of the entire situation may not be the hard fouls, the hostile crowds, or even the nonstop media scrutiny, but the growing perception that she is being forced to endure all of it largely alone. Game after game, fans and analysts have closely examined the body language of the Indiana Fever, searching for signs of unity, chemistry, and emotional support, yet what many believe they see instead is a fractured team struggling to adapt to the overwhelming spotlight that arrived with Clark's entrance into professional basketball. Every moment where Clark gets knocked to the floor without immediate confrontation from teammates, every awkward interaction on the bench, and every visible sign of frustration has fueled speculation that tension may exist beneath the surface of the locker room. Whether that perception is fair or exaggerated by social media, it has become a central part of the larger narrative now surrounding the Fever. Fans have started asking deeply uncomfortable questions about whether some veteran players privately resent the unprecedented attention Clark receives, whether they feel marginalized within an offense increasingly built around her skills, or whether the franchise's transformation into the center of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon has unintentionally created emotional divisions inside the roster itself. In professional sports, especially at the highest level, teams are expected to operate like tightly connected units that protect one another emotionally and physically, yet right now many observers believe the Fever often look disconnected, uncertain, and emotionally overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the spotlight surrounding them. That perception becomes even more damaging because Clark is not simply another talented rookie. She is the most watched player women's basketball has ever produced, a cultural phenomenon carrying enormous expectations from fans, networks, sponsors, and the league itself. The emotional isolation created by that pressure can become more exhausting than any aggressive defense or physical contact on the court. At the same time, coaches around the WNBA, including respected figures like Stephanie White of the Connecticut Sun, have approached Clark with highly disciplined defensive strategies specifically designed to wear her down over the course of a game. White's teams, known for their physicality, structure, and veteran toughness, became symbolic of the larger challenge Clark now faces every night in the league. Opponents throw aggressive defensive schemes at her, trap her in pick-and-roll situations, bump her constantly off the ball, pressure her full court, and force her into exhausting offensive possessions from the opening tip until the final buzzer. None of that is necessarily personal or malicious on its own because elite coaches are naturally going to build game plans around stopping the opponent's biggest threat. But when those strategies combine with nonstop media attention, social media controversy, public criticism, physical play, and questions about team chemistry, the total psychological burden becomes enormous. Clark is expected not only to win games, but to carry the future growth of the entire WNBA while simultaneously adjusting to the most difficult transition of her basketball career. That combination has created a situation many fans now view as unsustainable. The growing rumors about Clark potentially becoming emotionally exhausted or eventually wanting out of Indiana are not necessarily based on any official statement or credible report that she plans to leave. Rather, they stem from the visible accumulation of pressure surrounding her every single day. Supporters see a 22-year-old rookie dealing with constant scrutiny, aggressive defense, league-wide resentment narratives, Olympic disappointment, criticism aimed at her coach Christy Sides, questions about locker room chemistry, and the impossible expectation of transforming an entire franchise overnight. When all those elements collide at once, the story stops feeling like ordinary sports drama and starts resembling a psychological war of attrition. Every visible sign of frustration on Clark's face, every difficult post-game interview, and every emotional reaction during games now gets interpreted as evidence that the pressure may be pushing her toward a breaking point. Whether those fears are justified or overblown, they reveal how emotionally charged the environment around the Fever has become. What was once presented as a perfect fairy tale, a generational superstar arriving to save and elevate women's basketball, has evolved into a far more complicated and volatile reality. The Fever are no longer simply rebuilding a basketball team. They are attempting to manage the single most intense spotlight the WNBA has ever experienced, and the outcome of that struggle may shape not only Caitlin Clark's future, but also the future identity and stability of the league itself.